Good morning, everyone. So let's start. We are sorry that we are delayed a little bit, but this conference obviously started at the same time as these manifestations and demonstrations around the university, so we were waiting a little bit so that people could enter. And it's my pleasure actually to welcome everybody here, but we will open officially the conference in the afternoon. So now we will start with the first presentation by my student Yago, and he will talk about the evolution of ludic phenomena. So now it's your turn.
Thank you, Arka. Thank you very much for everyone. So, as Yago said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of ludic phenomena, focusing more on play and game, how they differ or are alike. And this presentation is based on the paper that we published this year in Frontiers in Psychology, where we try to show how sexual selection may have worked to make play a very diverse and polymorphous phenomenon. And if we look in the literature, we can see that there are basically two models of how play works. One model is more based on language like English, that treats play as a big trait that we can find in various behaviors. And game is just one subtype of play. Since game is played, game is also play, and therefore its functions, its evolution should be similar or at least equal to play. While the second model, which seems to become more popular with time, and I don't know why this is happening, but okay. Where we have a big trait that in Latin it would be ludus, in English it's usually used play. I use it playfulness because it's a word already used in the literature and to make it distinct from the play behavior. And then we have the behavior play and the behavior game, which they are alike in a certain part. There's a certain overlap between them, but they are different from each other. And most authors seem to suggest that they are not actually two different things, two circles. They are more like a continuous, where one pole is play, the other pole is game, and it's usually difficult to differ one from the other because everything is both play and game at the same time. It just, the difference is in which side of the pole it is. So here's a table that we show in the paper, where we collected a lot of definitions of play used in the literature by several authors, both from evolutionary psychology, biology, social psychology, social anthropology, and so on. And as you can see, there are a lot of traits that can be used to describe play, to define it, and it doesn't seem to be a clear pattern of what it is play. And part of this is exactly because of this distinction, that some people use play as a trait and other people use play as a behavior. So we can, if you look in these two last columns, for example, we have two authors using six adjectives, 6 features to try to describe play, and there's no overlap between them because even though they use the same words, they are not talking about the same thing. And this might be one of the reasons why the explanations of play, the literature of play, is so confusing many times. This other table is how people try to define a game. And as you can see, it's a lot more consistent. There's less features that people try to use it. And there's one that it seems unanimous. Everyone agrees that games have clear rules. So if you don't have rules, if you don't have clear rules, it cannot be defined as gaming, while play does not need to have rules necessarily. So here is a short list of phenomena that can be called play in certain languages and not in others. So we have free play, we have game, we have jokes, we have sport, music, and dramatizations, sexual intercourse, gambling, sadomasochism, puzzles, daydreaming. So as you can see, play can be used to describe a lot of things, very different from each other. So it's not surprising that we do not see a consensus in the literature about what is play, what is its functions, or how it works. So what exactly is play? Play is like Pinky from Pink and Blaine. So I don't know if everybody knows it, but who is Pinky? Pinky is the one that every day asks, what are we gonna do today? Why? Because what we did yesterday is boring, is not fun anymore. So play seeks novelty. It does not like old stuff. You try to do something new every time. And as a consequence, it is spontaneous and aimless. You do not know where you will get. You can start doing one thing and you do not know where it ends. And it's always accompanied, it's always together with a positive emotion. Some people call it happiness, some people call it the flow, some people call it fun. I chose fun, I think it's better. While game is like brain. Game seeks challenge. He wants to dominate the road. It doesn't matter that we already did it yesterday. We'll try to do it today again, and if we fail, we'll try to do it tomorrow again. And when we succeed, then we'll go to the next level. We'll try to dominate the galaxy and then the universe. We are always trying to find new challenge. So it's goal-oriented, and it, as you saw, it always has rules. So you cannot try to do anything you want. There's a protocol, there's a procedure that you must follow in order to achieve this goal, in order to overcome this challenge. And it does not need to have a positive emotion. The emotion that is together with game is training, is a kind of anxiety that you don't know if you will be able to succeed, if you will fail, or if you get what you want. So, yeah, games can be fun, but they do not need to be fun. It's only fun when you overcome this challenge. And playfulness is usually treated as a trait, something that envelops all of this. And I tried to explain it the shortest way possible as the easiness to become intrinsically motivated. So one of the things that play and game have common is that they are supposed to be intrinsically motivated, as all of the other playful phenomena, like arts, like oracles, and so on. In humans and other animals too, but especially in humans, it is treated as an individual difference trait. So some people are playful, other people are not. And it can also be used to describe activities and a property of things we do. In this case, it's usually called just play, but I call it playfulness to differentiate from the play behavior. And there's not a clear definition, but it's something like trying to activate the state of flow. Things that can easily activate the state of flow are usually called playful. And therefore, it can be present in almost any behavior. As long as you can get this intrinsic motivation, it can be described as part of the playful phenomenon. And this is not a new idea, something that I just thought this year and we tried to publish. It's very old. One of the oldest attempts to make this distinction is by the French philosopher Roger Caillois, which described that play, or jeu in French, and can be divided in 4 categories, 4 primary types. The type of agon is trying to get this motivation, this feeling of fun, of of training through competitions, and therefore it's best represented in our game of skills. The second type is alia, which gets its fun or training from surrender to destiny. Try to not act, just see what will happen. So it's usually seen in religious phenomena, especially fortune telling and games of chance. Mimicry is trying to get this happiness or fun and training, trying to pretend to be something you are not. It's usually seen in arts, especially in dramatization, and in the pretense play of children and non-human animals. And the last one is innings, which is getting fun or training through the disruption of perception. So through things that cause dizziness, through drug use, watching terror movies, anything that can make you have an altered state of mind, of consciousness. And all of these types, I call them primary because they are not mutually exclusive. They can combine to form new types. And they are always also present in two modes, which are actually a continuum and interval. So one pole, one side of this mode is paideia, which is this spontaneous or play-like way. And the other form is ludus, which is the structured or game-like form. So what we try to argue in this paper and in this presentation is that it's important to distinguish the play behavior from the play trait, which we call it playfulness, and which are not the same thing as game or as art or as religiosity, but they all have something in common. They all have something that make them be called play by a single word in some languages. And playfulness, this play trait, might be this thing. But of course, none of these phenomena are unidimensional. So they are always playfulness mixed with something else. So we need to do more research and more cross-cultural research to make sure that this linguistic difference, they reflect what we really want to study. We are not mixing trait and behavior. We need to understand how these phenomena, they are related. So what we find in research about game is similar to research about music. Is it because both cause the same things, or is it because they have this playful trait in common? Also, interspecies research, because sometimes it's hard to understand how it evolved or what its function if we do not seek it in other species. Differentiate individuals that are highly engaged from low engagement, since there's high inter-individual variability. We need to understand better why it's so high in some people and so low in others. And of course, since they are not unidimensional, we need to always consider the various levels that they operate. For example, using Timber's questions model as a framework. Here are the reference, and thank you.
If there are any questions, you can ask.
Thank you very much. As you know, one of the main evolutionary explanations for play is that it functions for learning across development. But if we think about learning, there's a typology of learning as well. So at least in humans, deliberate instruction, observation, vertical transmission, oblique transmission. So I'm wondering if we think about the typology of play crossed with a typology of learning, if we might get some insights that way.
Well, that one is mute.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, I didn't look exactly for these types of learning, but it's very possible that one of the reasons that play and difference between so many different phenomena might be because they use different types of learning. So, and it's a high possibility that as far as I know, no one has ever tried, but I think it might be a fruitful line of research if different playful phenomena can use different types, different ways of learning. I don't know. Anyone else?
Any other question, commentary? So thank you very much. So let's continue with the next presentation by our student Timon, and he will be talking about cooperation and behaviors, talking about his project about with the method of twins, right? Twin studies.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I am Timon Lebaron-Kherif. I will talk today about cooperation and behaviors and present the study of my PhD thesis. I will also briefly present some preliminary results that we got from a pilot study that I realized with collaborators with the University of Sorbonne Paris Nord. And the actual thesis is with the University of Sao Paulo and the University of Paris-Nanterre. So the plan of the talk is basically here. I will start with defining the concept of cooperation and then talk about cooperative behaviors and finally use this introduction to present the study. So first, let's define cooperation because as we saw with the last talk, we need to define concepts. We can all have an idea of what can be cooperation or play or other concept, but once we need to define it, sometimes we found some difference between our expectations. For example, here, cooperation can be an umbrella concept. I can have helping behavior, I can have altruism, I can have collaboration or even moralistic interaction. And in the literature, from what I saw, there is no consensus and there is not much debate about defining cooperation and try to specialize this concept in sub-concepts. And so it has a drawback that sometimes the literature is difficult to relate. There is some result, but maybe they are testing helping and others are testing collaboration. But the good point is that when you study cooperation, you can choose your own definition, and you can choose in the literature what suits you the best. So for mine, I wanted to go back to the roots of the word about cooperation. So co means together, and operation means working, interacting. So here I took a definition from Garnier and Latour, which is working together with a common goal, yet not necessarily identical. I will explain this briefly. For example, with these two climbers, they are working together to reach the mountain top, which is their common goal. They are helping each other, but maybe one is doing it for the sport, and the other one is doing it for the beauty of the scenery. So they are in the same goal, but slightly different, right? Once we have defined this, we are all on the same line here for cooperation. There is also different way to approach the study of cooperative behavior. The first and most basic one will be to do personal report, to ask people, are you cooperative and what do you do in this situation? But the big problem, of course, is that people are not always honest. So we shouldn't use this one much. On the other side, there is another design that was used a lot in the literature of cooperation, which is to use economical games. And this works much more. It is more realistic in the way that people through this game can earn money, can win money. And so there is a real incentive, and people want to win money, and so they will try to cooperate or will be selfish, and it will show much more honest behaviors. But there is, in these economical games, there is a variety of games trying to translate some situation of the life into games to see specific behaviors in specific situation. For example, there is two natures. There is the sequential resource allocation, which is you will invest or receive or give money in turns, and you will have many rounds. And so we can see at the investment or the total gain. And there is social dilemmas, where you will make choices, but the consequences will depend on the choices of other people, and you will have to do strategies maybe to earn more. These games have different variation. For example, in sequential resource allocation, there is a dictator game, ultimatum game, trust game. And in social dilemmas, there is the prisoner's dilemma, which is very famous, public good game, and intergroups prisoner's dilemma. And inside each of these games, there are alternatives. So, for example, the dictator game has 4 alternatives, and all the other also. And we have a lot of games to use, and sometimes we can get lost in what game to use and how to interpret this. This is very, very interesting and very important. With these economical games, we were able to better understand the functions of cooperation. We were better understand to see the interaction and maybe to test the theoretical hypothesis of evolution of cooperation. It was very important. But it also has a strong drawback to me. It's that it, of course, is in Occidental and capitalistic view. And some studies try to do intercultural studies, and they try to adapt these economical games and not playing with money, but playing with some other resource that will be pertinent for the indigenous people, for the tribes. But the logic itself is fundamentally capitalist. It says that you will want to earn as much as possible. And maybe this logic doesn't apply to other culture. Maybe they have other view of properties, of goods, and of interpersonal relationship. So this is one drawback about other cultures, but also it can be differently interpreted by children. So it has been used with children, but if you replace money with stickers, for example, it can be an adaptation, but the interaction between children may be not structured in the same way than with adults. So it is, of course, interesting, but it has some complication of interpretation sometimes. So, well, if you don't use personal reports or economical games, what can you do? Oh yeah, something else also. Economical games, they, about the nature and the theory, they can also promote cooperation, but we don't really know what kind of cooperation is being promoted, because people want to gain as much money as possible, even if the group doesn't earn money. And so are they really working for the group? Are they really working together if the ending point, if the aim is very personal game, very individualistic behavior? And maybe this beneficiary effect for others, which is important in prosocial behaviors here in cooperation, maybe these benefits for others are secondary effects. They are not wanted by the participants. So, well, if we don't use both these strategies, we can use experimental tasks. And basically, you take 2 children and you make them solve a puzzle, which is a much more realistic task. And it has a lot of good points for studying cooperation, for studying interactions. But the drawback here in the literature is that people always use a distant measure of cooperation. They always measure the consequences of behavior. For example, in economical games, they measure the total gain or the investment, which is the consequence of people, choice, and action. And for experimental tasks, they will look at the success of the task. They will see the time the children will use to solve the puzzle, for example. And this tells us about cooperation in a certain way, but it doesn't tell us about the behaviors itself. And they have a somehow distant way to see cooperation. Because if we think about our definition, maybe two children are very working together with a very common goal, but maybe they are very bad at solving a puzzle. And so they will be very cooperative, but if we only rate the success of the task, they will rate very low on cooperation, which may not be representative. So these have been mostly used for studying the functions, but now if we want to study the mechanisms of cooperation and cooperative behaviors, we have one last option, would be to use experimental tasks, but to focus on behaviors and cooperative behaviors, which will be returned to the basics. And so here we are interested in understanding better what behaviors could foster cooperation, what behaviors people use in interaction, and what we could maybe learn from these behaviors. It will be very interesting also to see the behaviors and to see the difference that have been found already between groups, and to see what behaviors each group use. For example, there were difference between males and females, and between different kind of twins, and between the ages. And it will be interesting to see if each group that have difference in the actual literature also have a different behavioral strategy. That's the aim of the PhD thesis. So we aim at looking at behavioral differences in cooperation in twin children between 5 and 10 years old, to have an age range sufficient to make age studies, but also to have a big sample size, hopefully. And we will study this in Brazil, in France, and in Lebanon. And you can ask later for this happy choice of country. About the design, we will ask an online survey to the parents of the children. It will contain a zygosity questionnaire, which is very easy and can assess if twins are identical or fraternal, which is important. We also have a twin relationship questionnaire to assess the relationship of the twins, because they will have later a task together. Important to control for that and to explore it. And other eco-socio-environmental questions about the sex of the twins and the age and the condition of the family and else. But the important task for us is an experimental task that will be done at home in total autonomy by the parents. They will ask their twins to sit at a table and to do a drawing together. The twins will have to draw together their house with one single sheet of paper and 5 markers. And the parents will record with their cell phone during 5 minutes. And then they can send us the video and we can analyze it. The analysis will be principally on the time spent drawing. We'll look at the duration and frequencies. So drawing, co-drawing when both children are drawing together. Paying attention to sibling when one child is looking at sibling or at sibling's work. Physical contact, the time spent touching. And non-negative oral interaction when they are basically communicating without being aggressive or criticizing. We will also look at physical dominant contact, because conflict can also help to regulate the cooperation. So we will look at monopolizing when they deter the other twin from accessing resources, or aggressive acts, or negative oral interactions. The analysis will be done with Boris, and for presenting this result, we use a total of 13 videos that have been collected during a pilot study in France and in Brazil, but there were few videos, so we didn't distinguish the country in the analysis. It makes a total of 26 twins, but we wish for much more. And what was interesting is that the behaviors that we saw the most in these few videos was communication, oral communication in a non-negative way. They used it a lot, and closely from this behavior, they were the physical contact duration. And then in third, they were the drawing behavior. And all other behaviors were less frequent. What will be also very interesting is to have a bigger sample size and start to to analyze behaviors depending on the groups categories, depending on the cultures, on the sex, and on the twin zygosity. And that's pretty all for the presentation of the study and the cooperative behaviors. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Very interesting talk. Do you have any questions, suggestions? There is one question over here.
Hi. First of all, thank you for your presentation. I was thinking about, I study personality psychology, and cooperative behavior is related to agreeableness. And we might think that people like to cooperate, but sometimes people who are too agreeable or too cooperative, they can build internal resentment if they feel they are being exploited by their peers or people who are not so cooperative. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Opa. Yes, that's what we were surprised sometimes to see in the videos, the conflict and the fighting even in very few of the twins, but they, as you saw on it was a very, I think 1 or 2 videos where the twins were actually fighting, still smiling because the parents were there filming, but actually, yeah, trying to resolve a conflict. And this cheating situation, if someone is too agreeable and too nice and too cooperative and then will be used by others, is, I think it's a very huge theoretical aspect of cooperation, and that's why at first it had so much difficulties to understand the evolution of cooperation, because cheaters will be more successful. But so it was very interesting to study the literature and see all the mechanisms and the regulation, the threat of punishment, of retaliation. If too agreeable people retaliate and punish the cheaters, can be a mechanism. And it would be interesting to investigate it more because it has been mostly used in a theoretical aspect, and maybe it would be nice to see how it will work in behaviors also.
I'm wondering if you can comment a little bit more on the advantages and disadvantages of using a twin design here, because of course over human evolution, most people grew up with siblings, but those siblings were of different ages and different developmental stages, and of course here you have 2 siblings that are exactly the same age. So I'm curious what your rationale was and what your experiences were in terms of the advantages and disadvantages of using a twin design.
Yes, I would have really loved to talk more about the twin specificities. It's a very special design and unique design that we can use in the human population and also in other animals population. So there is 2 kinds of twins. There is the identical twins and the fraternal twins. The identical twins are almost the same individual, and at sometimes there is even an identity fusion. They feel more or less like the other. They feel like they are in their identity. And they share a majority of their genes, up to 90% and sometimes even more, of their genes. So it's, from a natural perspective, it's very strange to imagine that you have your own life, but if your twin survive and reproduce in future life, it is almost as good as if you live and reproduce. So the relationship can really, it can really impact the relationship. You can invest in your co-twin and you don't even need to be so selfish about yourself. And we want to study more about their relationship with a questionnaire that we address to the parents, because we want to see the particularity of twin relationship also and how it can influence. Because as you said, they are growing together and the parents have to share resources. There is always 2 children to care. with the same needs almost. And so this is very interesting to see the influence between genetics and environments. That's why we use twin design most of the times. Because when there is behaviors in monozygotic twins, so the identical twins, and that there isn't in the dizygotical twins, which is fraternal twins, then you can suspect that there is a much more, a stronger impact of genetics in this behavior, in this happening, even if genetics and environments are always interrelated. But it can help in this way. And then there is other particularities we would like to observe also the relationship between the parents and the child and the impact it could have because of this particular design of growing together and having to invest in two children in the same time. There is many specificities that the laboratory here at University of Sao Paulo is trying to investigate. Yeah.
Any other question? So why Brazil, France, and Lebanon?
Thanks. So Brazil, let's say, Brazil was Brazil and France were the basis because of the. I come from France and I've been here studying in Brazil, and so it has been an opportunistic possibility to study the two countries. But it was also very interesting because France has its own historical story, historical roots, and Brazil seems to have different cultural roots and history, and Brazil is also a mix of cultures that I consider that it's much more a mix of cultures than France. So it will be interesting to see if there were differences between behaviors in these two aspects. And then Lebanon was a third different culture with different roots, different origins, more Arabic origins. But in the same time, in Lebanon, I think there were some colonialistic influence from France, and most of people there, or some people there, speak French, and the questionnaire will be used in French there. And so we will see if the three countries have differences, and if they have not, if they have similarities between Lebanon and France, for example, because they have interactions. But also here in Brazil, there is a lot of Lebanese people because of the immigration, and I even heard maybe that there is more Lebanese people in Brazil than in Lebanon, but it's not scientific, I don't know about this. And so also if there is not differences between Lebanon and Brazil, it would be interesting, and that's a mix of possibilities between the cultures that I'm very curious to investigate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.